Discover the incredible journey of the Mad King, exposed secrets of his heartwarming glass body. Frank the Mad King Mason gazed out over the town he once defended with pride, his heart heavy with memories that felt more like shackles than badges of honor. The storefront window of his father's glass-blowing shop reflected his haggard face like a funhouse mirror distorted and broken. Once a local hero, a man celebrated for bravery, now he stood as a shadow of his former self, wrestling with the invisible, haunting scars of war. His daughter Lucy had given him so much love, yet he still felt like a ghost in the very streets that used to embrace him. In this quaint rural town, life was defined by traditions, laughter at harvest fairs, the savory aromas of potluck dinners, and the comforting sounds of Sunday church gatherings. But now, those fond echoes seemed muffled by the judgmental whispers of neighbors who noticed the failing business and the hollow look in his eyes. "Isn't that the Mad King?" they'd say, but their voices dripped with pity rather than admiration. Lucy, with her bright eyes and yearning heart, whispered how she missed the father who would sweep her onto his shoulders and spin her around. Frank could only muster tearful nods, deep-seated shame knotting his throat. It tore him apart to see her carry the weight of his struggles, and he longed to shield her from the wounds he couldn't even understand himself. Then came the bad news. Rumors swirled that a faceless corporation was eyeing their hometown, eager to sweep in and buy out local businesses, including Frank's treasured shop. Cocky confidence flickered inside him, igniting a fuse that had lain dormant for far too long. The town had faced challenges before, but this felt different. It threatened to eclipse everything he had left. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the chilling winds of change howling through the town square, Frank found courage in the faces gathered around him. For the first time, he opened up about the nightmares that haunted him, the days that bled into relentless nights, and his fears that buried him alive. As he spoke, something shifted. His neighbors, once mere spectators, rallied around him with warmth and solidarity. They shared their own stories of resilience, their collective power an electric spark under the dreary sky. But the joy was tainted by one bitter truth: his estranged brother, Ethan, had aligned with the corporation, choosing profit over family. Their eyes locked across the crowd, a silent war raging between blood ties and the values Frank had vowed to uphold. When a family emergency struck, chaos replaced the comfort of shared stories. Waiting in the hospital, old wounds ripped open, and confrontations turned visceral. Tuna sandwiches and antiseptic scents mingled in the air, but all Frank could smell was the childhood turmoil he thought was behind them. Their unyielded anger was alive and pulsing, leaving Frank teetering on a precarious edge. As the town prepared for the yearly festival, a beacon of hope, Frank found himself at a crucial crossroads. Would he finally break free from the chains of his past and fight for his daughter's future? Or would he remain shackled to an older brother who embodied the very darkness he longed to escape? As he stood backstage, microphone in hand, anticipation crackling around him, another face from his past appeared in the crowd, determination flickering in her eyes, and Frank's heart dropped. He was left wondering how fragile the bonds of love and loyalty really were. And what path lay ahead? The festival buzzed with life, a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds swirling around Frank like a storm. Stalls lined the streets, each decorated with vibrant banners and lights that flickered like fireflies in the burgeoning twilight. But amidst the laughter and joy, his heart pounded with dread. The face he had spotted earlier haunted him, a ghost from his past that stirred up old regrets. As he stepped on stage, anxiety gripped him like a vice. The spotlight illuminated his weary features, transforming him into a symbol of his own unfulfilled dreams. He cleared his throat, but the silence of the crowd weighed heavily. The eyes of his friends and neighbors pierced through him, waiting for the Mad King to rise from the ashes and reclaim his crown. Lucy stood in the front row, her smile bright but tinged with worry, and that was all it took to ignite a flicker of hope within him. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice shaky yet resolute. "Tonight, we gather not just for celebration but for strength, for unity. We stand on the edge of a choice, music and fireworks drown out the shadows creeping into our town." A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience, instilling courage in him, like an electric current surging through his veins. He continued, sharing tales of how the town had fought against adversity before, the floods that tried to wash them away, the fires that sought to consume their spirit. They had emerged from those battles, stronger together. "There's talk of a corporation trying to buy us out to change everything we've fought for," he said, feeling the weight of every word. "But we have a choice. We've built something precious here, a community filled with love, memories, and resilience, and we won't just let that slip away." The crowd erupted in cheers. In that moment, Frank felt their energy. It coursed through his heart, shattering the shackles of fear and doubt. Visions of Lucy dancing in the sunlight, the echoes of joy from past harvest fairs filled his mind. But as their voices rose, Frank's eyes fixed on Ethan, standing at the back, arms crossed defiantly. The tension between them was thick enough to cut. Their history loomed like a dark cloud over the celebration, threatening to pour down rain on the festival. "You might think you're doing what's best for this town, Ethan," Frank shouted, facing his brother. "But it's not just about money. It's about our people. It's about what we stand for." His voice cracked, but he pressed on, emotion spilling like water from a broken glass. "We can't let greed divide us. We're brothers," and the words caught in his throat. He paused, letting the silence settle. A tumult of emotions danced in his chest: anger, love, hurt, and longing. Was he too late to reach out? Could he bring back the brother he once knew? Ethan's expression shifted. It was fleeting, perhaps a flicker of remorse, but just as quickly replaced by hardened resolve. "Brotherhood doesn't matter when you're drowning," he retorted, voice cold. The weight of those words struck Frank like a blow to the gut. Just then, the sky above erupted in a shower of sparkles and colors, distracting him momentarily. The crowd's awe-filled gasps brought a bittersweet smile to his face. He turned back to the crowd, aware that he had to make this moment count. As he prepared to speak again, a sudden crash erupted from the far side of the square, the sound of glass shattering. Everyone jolted and turned, eyes wide with confusion. Frank's heart raced. What had just happened? Was it a sign, an omen, or had the fractures in their community grown perilously deep? All he knew was that the true battle wasn't just against a corporation but against his own brother, and time was running out. Just then, he spotted Lucy's worried face again, giving him the strength to confront not only Ethan, but everything he feared. As he looked out over the crowd, a new determination sparked in him. The night was far from over. He took a deep breath, ready to face the music, ready to fight for everything he loved. But just as he started to speak again, a voice behind him called out his name, and he turned, heart in his throat. Would this new voice be an ally or an adversary? Frank's world shifted once more as he faced the unexpected, wondering if it would lead to redemption or deeper turmoil. "Frank!" The voice echoed in the charged air, slicing through the tension like a knife. He turned to see not just anyone, but old Mr. Thompson, the town's beloved but frail historian, weaving through the crowd with urgency. Frank's heart sank. What did the elderly man want now? More bitterness to add to the pile? "Mr. Thompson." Frank's voice cracked with concern, scanning the wrinkled face filled with worry. "What's happening?" Mr. Thompson's eyes darted to the distance behind Frank, something lurking in the shadows. "It's not safe, son. We need to talk now." The crowd's cheers faded into a low rumble, curious murmurs filling the air. Anxiety twisted tighter in Frank's chest. He caught Ethan's scowl, firm and unyielding, making it clear this was not the moment for distractions. "Everyone!" Frank raised his hand. "Please! Just a moment. A faint hush fell, but it was the worried stare of Lucy that held him, grounding him. He had to choose his words wisely. "Mr. Thompson, everyone's watching. Can it wait?" "No, it can't." Mr. Thompson's voice was grave, trembling slightly. "It's critical. The corporation, they're not just after land. They're after something far worse." "What do you mean?" Frank pressed, heart pounding in anticipation. Mr. Thompson took a breath, his frail form seeming smaller amidst the chaos. "They've been digging, looking for old secrets, things we've buried deep. It's connected to your family, Frank. The story of the Mad King, it's not just folklore." The weight of the revelation struck Frank like a cold splash of water. He felt the ground shifting beneath him. What secrets? Just then, the clamor of the festival intensified as fireworks blazed brightly overhead, but the glow felt distant, muted by the urgency of the moment. "They believe your family holds a treasure, something powerful enough to control the town. They think it's hidden beneath the festival grounds." Mr. Thompson's voice lowered as he leaned closer, eyes wide with fear. "They'll stop at nothing to find it." Frank's mind raced. He had heard the tales through his childhood, the fables of lost riches and the enigmatic Mad King, but in all those stories, he had never once imagined them as more than entertaining folklore. "What does this mean for us?" Frank whispered, trying to make sense of the swirling storm of emotions. "It means they'll use anyone, friends, families, even brothers, to get what they want," Mr. Thompson warned. "Ethan's caught in their web. You have to protect him and the town." As the last bursts of fireworks lit the sky, a bewildering mix of hope and dread surged through Frank. "I will," he vowed, steeling himself. "Thank you for warning me." Mr. Thompson nodded, his expression softening just a touch. "You have a fight ahead. Together, you can change the outcome." Frank turned back to the crowd, the weight of newfound understanding pressing against his heart. He needed to reunite his brother and the town, to forge a plan. But how could he bridge the ever-widening gap between them? "Everyone!" he shouted, rallying his voice to gather strength once more amid the cracking tension. "The night is still young, and we have much to fight for. Let us focus on our unity and strength against whatever comes our way." Cheers erupted again, but Frank still felt the shadow lurking behind him. Ethan was still standing firmly in the back, arms crossed and heart locked away. As Frank's gaze locked with his brother's, he found only anger reflected back at him. Somewhere inside, he hoped there was still a thread of brotherhood worth pulling on. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the opposite end of the square. The crowd gasped again, shifting, a wave of unease washing over them. What had shattered this time? Could it be that the real battle was not just against the corporation, but against the very trust that held their community together? And as Frank's pulse quickened again, he knew that whatever lay ahead would demand more than just words. It would require the courage to face both the enemy and the man who mattered most. How much time did he have before it all collapsed? The crowd whispered anxiously, their heads turning toward the source of the crash. Frank's heartbeat pulsed in his ears as he instinctively stepped toward the noise, adrenaline sharpening his senses. He glanced at Mr. Thompson, who looked pale, clearly terrified by the commotion. "What was that?" Frank asked, his voice barely breaking through the rising tension. Mr. Thompson didn't reply, his gaze fixed on the unfolding chaos. Frank began to push through the crowd, aware that he might lose Ethan in the surge of bodies. He needed his brother beside him, now more than ever. The festival organizers were frantically trying to regain control, shushing the crowd while searching for the cause of the disturbance. In the distance, a broken booth lay sprawled across the ground, its colorful decorations scattered like fallen leaves. A few nearby children cried, their parents lifted them up to comfort them, eyes wide with fright. "Ethan!" Frank shouted, still trying to see through the mass of people. He spotted his brother, still frozen in place, arms crossed, but now he appeared more confused than angry. As Frank reached Ethan, a sudden jolt of warmth surged through him. Did you see that? He asked, breathless. The booth just collapsed, Ethan said, his voice almost lost within the chaotic buzz around them. But why are people acting like it's the end of the world? Frank swallowed hard, torn between the urge to comfort Ethan and the knot of fear growing deeper. Listen, we can't let this distract us. We need to talk about what Mr. Thompson just told me. Mr. Thompson? What did he say? Ethan's eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing in their depths. It's about the treasure, the Mad King, and the corporation. They're not just looking for land, they want something powerful beneath our feet, Frank said urgently, forcing the words out despite the dread in his chest. Ethan scoffed, letting out a shaky laugh. You really believe that? It's all stories, Frank. Folklore. You're letting an old man manipulate you. Those words stung. Frank felt a sharp pang in his heart, but he held firm. This isn't just a story anymore. People's lives are at stake. His voice rose, desperation creeping in. You mean more to me than this whole festival, Ethan. Don't shut me out. Ethan shook his head, the tension between them like a tightly pulled wire. Do you even hear yourself? You think I'm the one locking you out? What are we even doing here then? Frank asked, frustration boiling just beneath the surface. You're standing there, and I'm trying to save not just you but our family and this town. Just then, the crackle of walkie-talkies echoed, drawing attention back to the front of the crowd. A group of uniformed officers appeared, pushing their way through, faces set with determination. Frank's gut twisted. The officers moved toward the fallen booth, but Frank could see a glint of something metallic among the wreckage, a bright flash in the chaos. His breath caught in his throat. What? He began, moving closer to the fallen structure. There was something there, buried under the splintered wood and torn fabric. Frank, wait. Ethan called, but curiosity pulled him closer. He reached down and grasped a piece of the object almost instinctively, his fingers brushing against cold metal. As he pulled it into the light, his heart raced. It looked like an ancient amulet, ornate and shimmering, unlike anything he had ever seen. What's that? Ethan said, stepping closer, eyes wide. Could it be? Frank's voice trailed off, realization dawning. Before he could speculate, the officers approached him, blocking his view. Step back, one shouted, their tone sharp. Ethan's hand clenched around Frank's arm. This whole thing is turning into a nightmare. Or maybe, it's just beginning, Frank replied, a mix of hope and fear fluttering in his chest. He couldn't shake that feeling, the more he uncovered, the deeper the mystery became. And what about the corporation? He suddenly felt like a cog in a brewing storm, and with each heartbeat, he realized the real battle was only unfolding. What secrets were waiting to be unveiled? Frank felt the tension in the air as the officers surrounded him. They were like sentinels, blocking anything that might lead him closer to the truth. His fingers instinctively tightened around the amulet, a cool pulse resonating against his palm, almost as if it were alive. What do you think you're doing? One officer barked, his eyes narrowing, the authority behind his voice sending a shiver down Frank's spine. I found this, Frank said, trying to keep his voice steady. It was under the booth. It might be important. Back off. The officer shouted again. The crowd murmured, a collective wave of confusion rippling through those gathered. Ethan's grip on Frank's arm tightened, his expression morphing into one of both concern and fear. Frank, please. Just let them handle this, Ethan urged, almost pleading. But something about the metal in his hand pulled Frank closer to the mystery. He couldn't let it go, not when the weight of it held so many unanswered questions. He glanced at the ornate markings adorning the amulet, ancient symbols that whispered history, tales of power and legends long forgotten. Frank. Ethan's voice cut through the haze of his thoughts, though it came out more like a worry than a question. Maybe this is what they were looking for, Frank said, ignoring the officer's command, his heart pounding. Just then, he felt a bristling anger at the way they were dismissing something so significant. Memories of their childhood stories, the Mad King and his quests, flooded back. Was this amulet part of those tales? Without thinking, he took a step forward. This is our town, our history. We have a right to know what it is. The officer's gaze hardened, and for a split second, Frank feared he would be pulled away. Yet, at that moment, he also noticed something else. The eyes of the crowd were now on him. Some were filled with curiosity, others reflected a shared concern. Could they feel it too? Frank's right. Someone shouted from the back, emboldening the crowd. This is about our history. A murmur of agreement grew, and more voices joined in. We deserve answers. The officer hesitated, looking at the increasingly restless crowd. The momentum was shifting. Frank could feel Ethan's tension beside him, the worry etched deep into his brother's features. What if you're wrong? Ethan whispered, anxiety cracking his voice. Then at least we'll know, Frank replied. The resolve flooded through him, chasing away the uncertainty. Moments later, the officer sighed, his expression softening just a fraction. Get the artifact and bring it to the station. We'll take it from there, but you need to step back now. As the officer moved forward to take the amulet, Frank reluctantly released his grip, the cool metal slipping from his fingers into the officer's palm. A sudden rush of emptiness washed over him. What will happen to it? Frank asked, his voice small. We'll investigate it, the officer replied tersely. That's all I can promise. As the crowd buzzed with speculation, Frank glanced back at Ethan. The two boys stood shoulder to shoulder, and in that moment, an unspoken agreement passed between them. They may not have all the answers now, but they wouldn't stop searching for them. Frank, I still think you're leaving something out, Ethan said, his voice less tense now, almost inquisitive. What about the corporation and the treasure? You said they want something powerful. This amulet, could it be it? Frank turned back to where the officers had disappeared into the crowd. It could be, he murmured. And we have to figure it out together. Just then, a loud crash erupted from the far side of the festival grounds, similar to the initial commotion that had sent everyone into chaos. The crowd gasped, fear etched across their faces. What now? Ethan asked, his eyes wide with surprise. I don't know, Frank replied, scanning the crowd, his pulse racing anew. But whatever it is, I have a feeling it's connected to everything we've discovered. With the sense that this was only the beginning, Frank grabbed Ethan's arm, steeling himself for whatever was to come. We need to move, Ethan. Something tells me we're not done here. Before they could take a step, the ground beneath them vibrated, as though it held its breath, unearthing a secret of its own. What lay beneath, waiting to be discovered? Frank's heart raced as the ground continued to rumble beneath his feet. It felt like a distant thunderstorm, rolling closer, urging him forward. The crowd shifted uneasily, old fears clashing with new courage as whispers flew around about the amulet and what it might herald. What was that? Ethan's voice trembled. I don't know, but we have to see, Frank insisted, already feeling a pull that was hard to resist. The echoes of clattering metal and hurried shouts came from the direction of the crash. He noticed a few festival-goers glancing back toward the main stage. A tension hung in the air like an electric charge. They pushed their way through the throng, adrenaline surging. What had been a fun-filled celebration now seemed transformed, shadows dancing across faces that were a mix of wonder and fear. The festival lights flickered, casting eerie shapes in the deepening dusk, and Frank could feel the weight of eyes upon him. As they reached the edge of the festival area, they saw it the remnants of a toppled food cart, its contents strewn about in chaotic disarray. But it wasn't just that. A large, rectangular object, half buried in the ground behind the cart, glinted oddly in the fading light. Do you see that? Frank pointed, nudging Ethan. It looks like something underneath. What if it's another artifact? Ethan whispered, eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. Frank nodded, the pulse of the amulet still lingering in his mind. Whatever it is, we can't leave it. Cautiously, they made their way forward, the crowd behind them growing hushed as they approached the strange object. A few older folks in the crowd murmured, undoubtedly remembering stories from their past, tales of what lay buried under their feet. With trembling hands, Frank reached down to push the debris aside, revealing engraved symbols. They were similar to those on the amulet. He squinted, trying to make sense of it. The air was thick with expectant silence, and the distant sounds of laughter and music faded away, replaced instead by the rhythmic beating of his own heart. "Frank, be careful," Ethan warned, concern creeping into his voice. Frank could feel his palms sweat as he brushed away the last of the dirt. The object was smooth and cold beneath his touch, an elaborately designed chest that seemed to hum softly with energy. "What are you hiding?" he murmured, almost to himself. And then, as if provoked by his words, the chest emitted a bright flash, startling both boys, and then it began to creak open. Instantly, a rush of wind burst forth, carrying with it the echo of distant laughter, like whispers of the past beckoning them near. "Frank!" Ethan shouted, but Frank was too caught up in the moment. The pull of the unknown was too strong. The inside of the chest revealed scrolls, glimmering trinkets, and small tokens of a time that felt both foreign and familiar. Frank felt an overwhelming pull to dive deeper into the secrets housed within. "This could lead us to answers," he breathed, excitement coursing through him. But before they could truly investigate, the crowd surged closer, drawn in by the spectacle. Frank and Ethan exchanged determined glances. They wouldn't be swept away. Whatever this was, whatever it held, it was theirs to uncover. Then, from among the throng, an older woman with silver strands in her hair stepped forward, her eyes wide and her voice trembling. "You shouldn't have opened that." Frank felt a chill ripple through the air, the urgency of her words echoing in his mind. "Why not?" "Because some things are better left hidden, and that is only the beginning," she warned, her gaze piercing. Frank's gut twisted with apprehension. He never questioned before, but now he stood at a precipice not just of history, but of something far greater. "What have we started?" He wondered silently to himself, as figures began moving through the crowd, cloaked in shadows, their own intentions unknown. As the environment thickened with a blend of excitement and fear, Frank realized they were not alone in their quest, not just in the search for truth, but something darker was at play. "Ethan," he whispered, urgency spilling from his lips. "We need a plan. We're going to find this out, but we have to be smart." Frank felt the weight of the amulet still echoing in his pocket, the cool pulse a reminder of everything at stake. What other secrets had they awakened? Frank's pulse quickened as the crowd pressed in around the chest, a whirlwind of excitement mixing with dread. The older woman stood resolute, her breath quickening, and Frank felt her fear seep into him. "What do you mean by the beginning?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman glanced over her shoulder, eyes darting like startled birds. "They are coming," she said, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. "You've opened something that should have remained closed, a doorway to the past, where shadows lurk and echoes awaken." Ethan swallowed, standing a little closer to Frank, as if hoping to draw courage from him. "Who's coming?" he pressed, looking around the gathering crowd, which had now transformed from curious festival-goers to anxious spectators. "Those who seek what you've uncovered." "Ambition does not come without a price," the woman cautioned, her voice trembling but fierce. "You must secure the chest before they find you. They'll want what lies within." With a shaky breath, Frank reached for the chest, his fingers brushing against the cool, smooth wood, feeling the energy pulsing beneath his touch. He turned to Ethan, the weight of responsibility sitting heavy on his shoulders. "We need to take it. We can't let it fall into the wrong hands." Ethan nodded, but doubt shadowed his expression. "But what if opening it does something worse?" "That's a risk we have to take," Frank insisted, already weighing their options. The urgency was electric, now a palpable force urging him to act. As he and Ethan hoisted the chest carefully from the ground, encircled by gasps from the crowd, a sudden gust of wind swirled around them. Frank's heart pounded as phantom whispers swept through the air. Shadows flickered at the edges of his vision, and for a moment, he thought he saw figures moving through the revelers, cloaked and determined, their eyes fixed intently on their prize. "Frank, we should go," Ethan urged, fear creeping into his voice. He scanned the crowd, seemingly a step ahead of Frank. "I don't like this." "Just a bit longer," Frank said, stubbornness flickering to life inside him. "If we can figure out what this is, we could change everything." Suddenly, the silver-haired woman stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch Frank's arm. "The shadows wait. They track you by your desires. They find it irresistible." What do we do?" Frank stammered, uncertainty twisting inside him. "Listen closely. You must take the chest to the old museum by dusk tomorrow. Only there can its secrets be contained, but you must act quickly." Her intense eyes bore into his, and Frank felt a connection deeper than words. It was fear, resolve, and something unexplainable. "I don't even know what's in there," Frank replied, glancing back at Ethan. "But you have the choice to protect it, or unleash it," she countered, her voice bringing clarity amid the chaos. Before he could respond, a flash caught his eye. Figures cloaked in shadows began advancing from the edges of the crowd, their intentions clear and menacing. "Now!" the woman urged, urgency igniting their feet into motion. Frank, heart racing, nodded to Ethan, and they started running, clutching the chest tightly against their chests. "Where?" Ethan gasped, glancing back. "Anywhere but here." Frank shouted, the thrill of escape mingling with the gnawing concern of the unknown. They darted through the crowd, hearts pounding in a chaotic rhythm, the music blaring behind them, now just a distant echo. Each step felt like a leap into darkness, and with every hurried glance back, Frank realized their journey had just begun. What lay ahead was uncertain, but the thrill mixed with fear urged them onward as shadows loomed closer, hungry for secrets buried long ago. "Ethan," Frank shouted as they hit the end of the festival grounds. "We can't let them take this from us. Not now. Not ever." With a final glance at the gathering storm behind them, they tore off beyond the reach of the festival lights, diving into the darkened streets that awaited, the weight of the chest a constant reminder of the path they could no longer turn away from. What awaited them on the other side of the city could change everything, if they could survive against what came for them in the dark. The streets were dimly lit, shadows stretching like fingers as Frank and Ethan sprinted forward. The pounding of their feet echoed off brick walls, mixing with the distant laughter and music that faded away behind them. Adrenaline coursed through Frank's veins, fueling his determination. He couldn't help but glance back, and with each fleeting look, he felt the weight of unseen eyes tracking their every move. "Keep going," Ethan urged, his voice strained from the rush. "We have to find somewhere safe." Frank nodded, ears ringing. There was a small alley up ahead he remembered from years past. It was narrow but led to an abandoned building, a safe haven where they could catch their breath and plan their next move. They ducked into the alley, the world narrowing around them as they pressed against the cool brick of the wall. "What now?" Ethan panted, worry creasing his brow as he fidgeted with the chest, his hands slipping slightly due to perspiration. "We need to hide this," Frank said, eyeing the entrance to the alley. The shadows seemed to draw closer, as if waiting to pounce. "We can't open it here. We don't even know what's inside." Ethan nodded, pulling his hands away from the chest as if it had burned him. "Couldn't we just leave it here? Find help?" Frank hesitated. "We don't know who to trust, not now. If those figures are really tracking us, they'll be looking for that." The memory of the silver-haired woman sprang back to him, her urgency crawling under his skin. "We just have to make it to the museum by dusk. That's our only chance to figure this out." "Dusk," Ethan echoed, his voice heavy with desperation. "That's less than 24 hours away." And what if we don't make it? What if whatever's after us gets us first? Frank did not have an answer. All he could offer was a glance that hoped to ignite some shared courage. "We'll make it," he said, though his heart thudded with doubt. Together. The alley grew darker, the air thick with an uneasy tension. They pressed on, hearts beating in sync with the unknown danger lurking behind them. As they reached the far end of the alley, Frank caught sight of the building entrance, a rickety doorway that swung slightly on its hinges. He motioned for Ethan to follow as they slipped inside. Dust motes danced in the air, and a musty smell enveloped them, thick with memories of what had once been a lively place. They found themselves in a dilapidated room, shattered windows providing just enough light to see. "This should work for now," Frank said, setting the chest down near a rotting table. "We need to plan our next steps." Ethan nodded, but his eyes darted around the room. "What do you think they want? Do you think the chest holds something dangerous?" "I don't know." Frank's voice was firm yet shaky. "But we don't have the luxury of time. They could be following us now, and if they catch up." He swallowed hard, haunting images already invading his mind. A sudden crash echoed from the entrance, sending both boys spinning around. The door creaked ominously before crashing open. A figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, cloaked in darkness, their face obscured. "Did you really think you could hide from us?" The voice hissed, slicing through the thick tension like a knife. Frank felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Ethan, run!" he shouted as the figure stepped forward, and the air crackled sharply with tension. "Frank!" Ethan yelled, pulling his friend back just as light glinted off a blade shimmering in the figure's grip. They turned to bolt, but the room had become a trap, the path to the exit now barred. In that heartbeat of dread, Frank connected with Ethan's fearful gaze, the chatter of the outside world silenced by the gravity of their situation. "We have to open it," Frank shouted suddenly. "It might be our only way out." Ethan's eyes widened. "You're crazy. What if it makes things worse?" But the figure advanced, drawing closer. They had no other choice. "On three," Frank said, determination flushing through him as he braced himself against the ancient chest, Ethan right beside him. As the tension reached a boiling point, the fate of their choices swung precariously between fear and hope. Would the chest's secrets unleash their salvation or doom them to the shadows lurking just beyond their reach? Together, they counted in unison. 1, 2, 3. The chest creaked open with a reluctant groan as Frank and Ethan threw their weight against it. Dust clouds billowed from its ancient hinges, surrounding them in a fog of anticipation. Dull light spilled from the open lid, revealing a chaos of old papers, rusty trinkets, and a small, glowing orb nestled among the debris. "What the?" Ethan squinted into the chaos, trying to make sense of the bizarre scene unfolding before them. He felt a strange pull, an itch in his mind whispering for him to reach out. "Frank, what is that?" "I don't know, but we need to find out fast." Frank leaned closer, heart thumping violently in his chest. The figure loomed nearer, shadows unfurling like smoke, and Frank could see the glint of hunger in its eyes. With a sudden surge of bravery, he reached into the chest. The moment his fingers brushed the orb, warmth flooded through him, a stark contrast to the chill of the encroaching danger. It pulsed gently, as if it recognized him, and images flashed in his mind, snapshots of a life that was not his own, moments of joy, tears of laughter, the warmth of friendship. "Frank, get back!" Ethan shouted as the ominous figure lunged forward, no longer just a shadow but a terrifying presence. But Frank was frozen, the pulse of the orb synchronizing with his racing heart. A shimmering cascade of light erupted from the orb, enveloping both boys like a protective cocoon. Frank's mind swirled, clarity cutting through the fog of his fear. "Look!" he managed to shout, voice nearly drowned by the chaos. "It's showing me something." Ethan stumbled backward, eyes wide as he pulled Frank away instinctively. "We have to go. Get the orb and let us." Suddenly, he faltered, the light from the orb seemed to grab him too, pulling him into its tender embrace. Wait. Frank hesitated, torn. He could feel Ethan's terror, the need to escape clashing with the hope growing inside him. This might be our chance. The figure halted, confusion flickering in its dark gaze as the light expanded, illuminating the room and revealing once hidden walls covered in strange symbols and illustrations. The stories carved into the wood whispered of heroism and sacrifice, of battles fought not just in the physical realm but within the hearts of those who dared to fight against the shadows. With the orb still glowing faintly in his grip, Frank took a deep breath. If we can unlock its secrets, it could help us understand what we're really dealing with. Unlock? Ethan echoed. Are you out of your mind? We could get killed. This is our only shot, Ethan. Frank pressed, desperation clawing at him. If we don't act now, we're done for. Together, just like we always said. The figure began to advance again, determined, fierce. Frank clenched the orb. On 3, we face our fears. Not this again. Ethan cried, yet something flared in his eyes, something stubborn, resolute. Just trust me. 1, 2, 3. As if responding to their synchronized courage, the orb flared brighter, casting the dark figure in light. Everything slowed, they could both feel an undeniable connection, a bridge forming between the dangers outside and the courage that stirred inside them. Yet as the room pulsed with light, an echoing laughter cold and mocking reverberated through the air, raising their skin in goosebumps. Fools! You think you can stand against us? The figure's voice curled around them, vibrating with power. As the orb countered with an explosion of energy, bridging the gap between light and dark, Frank felt a new sense of resolve swell within him. This was at the point of no return. It didn't just hold their fears. It held their hope, and perhaps, just perhaps, the key to breaking their chains. Would they uncover the truth behind the light before it consumed them? Or would the shadows snatch the chance for redemption from their hands? With the battle for their lives hanging by a thread, they would soon find out. The light from the orb expanded, wrapping around Frank and Ethan like an invisible tether, steadying their racing hearts. The figure looming before them hesitated, its shadowy form flickering in the brilliance. Frank could feel the pulse of something ancient and powerful coursing through the orb, a heartbeat that mirrored his own growing resolve. Frank! Ethan shouted, eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. What do we do next? The laughter from the figure echoed in the room, cold and mocking, but Frank refused to let it shake him. He tightened his grip on the orb, drawing strength from its radiance. We fight for our town and for family. This is our legacy, Ethan. As they stepped forward, emboldened by the orb's glow, the walls adorned with carved symbols gleamed in response, illuminating the shadows that had surrounded them. Each heartbeat became a rhythmic declaration of their intention to reclaim not just the chest south secrets but their place in the world, free from the shackles of their shared past. With every inch they approached, the figure recoiled. You think you can wield that light? It hissed, menacing eyes narrowing. That relic does not belong to you. We'll decide what it means, Frank shot back, stepping in front of Ethan protectively. It belongs to everyone who has poured their love into this town. We're not afraid anymore. Suddenly, the light pulsed fiercely, and the air shimmered with energy. Frank felt an electric current between him and the orb, bolstering his courage. His heart swelled as memories flooded his mind, Lucy's laughter echoing in the vibrant streets, the warmth of friendship solidified through years of shared struggle. That was what he was fighting for, not just against the shadows, but for every joyous moment that had built their community. Stop! The figure howled, lunging forward, but the orb's light acted like a shield, enveloping them in its warmth, pushing the darkness back. Together! Frank yelled, and as if like a spell, Ethan grasped the orb together with him. Their fingers intertwined around the artifact, and inexplicably, the light became blindingly bright, a fortress against the encroaching shadows. Wisps of darkness flaked off like ash as the figure clawed against the barrier they had created. You can't. It shrieked, shaking with rage. You don't understand what you're unleashing. But they no longer feared what lay within. Frank could feel the orb unlocking the tales hidden for so long, whispering the histories of those who came before them, tales of redemption, courage, and love forged in the fires of adversity. Together, they could fight against the darkness. With a surge of force, Frank shouted, "For our town. For Lucy. For family." The orb burst forth a wave of light so powerful that it illuminated the entire room, each flickering symbol on the walls illuminating a path toward peace. The foreboding shadows were cast aside, dissipating into the corners as if swept away by a gentle wind. And then came silence. As the blinding light waned, the figure collapsed into a heap of darkness, no longer threatening, merely a shadow of the fear it once instilled. Frank inhaled deeply, heart racing, a sense of victory soaring inside him. Ethan was still beside him, awe on his face. Did we do it? I think we did. Frank replied, realization flooding through him. They had discovered what it meant to fight together, rallying their shared strength against all odds. Suddenly, the chest beside them glowed warmly, the woven patterns on its surface flickering to life, revealing stories yet untold. Frank reached out, curious about what lay inside, but the moment felt sacred, the power of unity grounding them. Together, Ethan repeated, a smile breaking across his face. We truly can face anything. As they stepped away from the remnants of the battle, the air hummed with the promise of new beginnings. Now, they needed to share this light, to gather their town around them, to reignite that sense of community that had flickered and dimmed over the years. Let us bring this to the festival, Frank said. Heart swelling with purpose. Let us show everyone that we're still here, still fighting, still standing strong together. Ethan nodded, excitement bubbling within him. I can already see Lucy's smile. With renewed energy, they navigated through the darkened back streets, leaving behind the old fears that used to bind them. The city was alive with distant sounds of celebration, laughter threading through the air like a melody guiding them home. As they emerged from the shadows into the flickering lights of the festival, a collective gasp surrounded them. Eyes wide, their neighbors stood waiting, relieved, hopeful, united. Frank held the orb high, heart pounding with exhilaration. We are not alone. He shouted, the brightness in his heart shining for all to see. Together we are unstoppable. Together we are home. Cheers erupted, echoing through the streets, filling the night with joy, a signal that they were ready to reclaim the heart of their town. As they stood side by side, illuminated by the light of connection and love, Frank knew this was more than a triumph over fear, it was a celebration of family, community, and the resilience to rise again and again, stronger each time. Moments later, Lucy squeezed through the crowd, jumping into Frank's arms with pure joy. He held her close, tears of joy filling his eyes as he breathed in her familiar warmth. Dad! She exclaimed, beaming. I knew you'd find a way. Yes, my sweet Lucy, he said, holding her tightly. We're here, and we're not going anywhere. The future stretched out before them, radiant and hopeful, as they all raised their voices together, shouting toward the stars, together. Now was the moment to share this incredible journey. Tell your friends about the Mad King and the bond of brotherhood. You need to subscribe now to not miss any more exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these stories alive. Comment your reactions and feelings about the ending, because I want to hear from you. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Let us keep the light shining bright.